Sometimes you've wanted to watch a film forever and you just can't even remember why, and every time you see it in like a DVD shop or on the TV guide or an iPlayer, you can't help but wish you had the time to sit down and do it. For me, Frequency is one of those films. It was playing late night on BBC Two like 10 years ago, and I wanted to see it, and my mum said, you can't see that because it's got a serial killer in it, because I read the review in the Radio Times. This is old. I read the review in the Radio Times and there's a serial killer in it and you can't watch it. Well, guess what, Mum? I grew up. Okay? I'm grown up now, and I watched Frequency and it wasn't very good.
What did you say your name was?
Frank Sullivan.
Is this some kind of joke?
That will allow John Sullivan to talk to his father.
What do you say we tame this Bronco, huh? You and me, spirit and guts.
Who's been dead for 30 years.
So Frequency kicks off in a sort of Halcyon youth, like the hot autumn of 1969, where a daredevil daddy saves the day as a fireman and Madonna mum looks beautiful while she's cooking bolognese. It's evocative and archetypal. It's like Stephen King and the baby boomer 50s thing that he's got going on. It's shorthand for the audience to get into the story as quickly as possible, which in this case is actually quite good because it has to cover a lot of ground. And then we move via a nicely observed CGI shot to 1999, then the modern day, where a grown-up John is suffering from yet another breakup, apparently, of long-term relationships that he's always suffered. His best mate lives next door, and his son is weirdly young Michael Cera in one of his first appearances, and soon enough they unpack his dad's old ham radio. One problem I have with this kind of movie where it's got a kind of high concept in it is that the audience catches on to the idea long before the characters do, and then there's always a frustrating 5 or 10 minutes where they don't know what's happening. My favourite example of this is in a film that I actually really like, which is Back to the Future. Marty McFly gets into a machine that he's told is a time machine, that he's seen time travel before, and then he time travels, with big flashing lights and everything, to the 1950s. And then it's only when he bloody well picks up a paper that has the date on it that he finally realises he's in the 1950s. I mean, just pay attention to your surroundings, Marty. And likewise, in this film, I was a little bit worried that you'd have that moment. Luckily, they actually manage it quite well. Both the men slowly realise the other's identity and they have a solid, reasoned argument about it. Just makes me able to like the characters a little bit more, you know? So the whole cool idea about the movie is that high concept thing of a sort of version of time travel where past events can affect present ones kind of in real time. Whatever that means. I'm pretty sure that's not how time travel would work in the real world. The film certainly makes no attempt to explain it. At one point, it dollies in on a TV where a guy says, string theory, and that's pretty much the closest thing they get to an actual explanation of the whole thing. But what is nice is that the movie doesn't always give a link between the two people in terms of literal metaphysical events that are taking place in the past and the present in a kind of high concept way. Sometimes it's just by association. So at one point, John relives the fire and finding out about his dad's death as his dad goes into the fire. That's really nice. That's an intercut that's more associative and less to do with a kind of metaphysical realism that sometimes breaks down, especially in this stuff where things like time travel and things aren't really well defined and sometimes the audience can lose track of them. Here the director makes a really good choice by just sticking to the ideas and feelings of the characters instead of this like purported metaphysical reality that he's built up. Purported metaphysical reality. That's pretty much the most pretentious thing I've said in a while. Hope you're keeping track. At the end of the day, this is sort of a potboiler that slightly outstays its welcome by overreaching into the realm of sci-fi that it's not really interested in and doesn't really care about the ramifications of what it says. The emotions are heartfelt but glurgy, the characters are stereotypical but nicely played, and the action works out pretty much as you'll expect. So it's fine. It's a fine movie. It's a 3 out of 5. But my gosh, I wish that my mum had given me the chance to watch Frequency as a kid and hadn't told me off it just because there was a serial killer in it. I mean, I watched CSI at the time, and CSI is way more violent. This movie's almost sweet. At the end of the day, it's about two men rediscovering each other. It's about how masculinity can get in the way of emotion and sentimentality in a father-son relationship. That's not a particularly special story. The way that they tell it isn't even particularly special, though I suspect they thought it was very clever at the time. But it's nicely done, and it's full of these kind of apt little metaphorical moments. There's a bit when they're talking to each other through the ham radio, both men kind of smoking and drinking, and laughing at each other, where you get a sense that a man who was far too masculine to be able to connect with his young son, who's quite different, ends up being able to connect with him as a man. They talk about whatever they can. They talk about baseball, booze, women. And that ends up being a kind of sweet thing. That's a cute moment in the film. I'm not going to tell you to go out of your way to get Frequency. I think it's unlikely you're going to see it on TV anytime soon. It hasn't been on iPlayer in a couple of years. But if you see it in a TV guide, or if it's available on a video demand platform soon enough, what's the harm? Hope you enjoyed my review, folks. Now, if you're deeply in love with Dennis Quaid and you feel like I've wronged him really badly, then please let me know in the comment box down below. Don't forget to click subscribe to get my next video when it comes out. And if you're there, then I'll see you next week. Have a good one.